Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? I can't do it. Not me. It's not happening. Things are going great. We're having fun. We're going to talk all about it today. We're doing the turtles in the thumbnail. If you haven't seen, we're talking about turtle power, as in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I had an idea from both Jeff Bezos and a new AI video I've seen. Someone has redone with the entire 80s aesthetic, as if the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from the movie from the early 90s were actually in the WWF, and Shredder is like a villain, and it's really good stuff. It's why it's peak AI slop. Better than AI slop, of course. But there you go, everyone. As you know, I still haven't figured out how to get the comments the way I want. So I'm going to be reading the comments off of Rumble. Good morning, gang, from JJ Fox. It's Turtles all the way down. Happy Tuesday. Citadel Daniel in the house. Good morning, Awakeners. Hassan, good morning indeed. Lance 2002, good morning, friends. Are we talking about autistic turtles? Of course, we're talking about autistic turtles. We love the autistic turtles. So happy to be here. Seaburger17 says it's going to be a great day, and this is a fantastic way to start it. You're right about that. This might be the best time we've ever had in the morning together. I've got a great show for you. So much happening in the news. We're going to have fun talking about all of it, of course. Good morning, peace, love, and Bitcoin from Greg. Noah, it is the best part of the day, awakening time. Good morning from Wisconsin. Hello, Wisconsin. We love Wisconsin. Good morning from sunny Colorado Springs. Indeed. Good morning, everyone. I was thinking that prisoners versus the pedal bikes, PvP, might give space drops a run for the money. Greg, you're on to something. There's been a hole in our hearts since bum fights were taken away from us. And I'm pretty sure that the way to replace the entertainment value of the old bum fight days is, of course, the pedal bikes versus the prisoners. We'd love it. We would love it. JJ Fox says, smash that like button, feed Seymour. We love Seymour. A game made by Activision. I get the idea. Good morning, Awakenings, Awakened, Awakeners. Rise and rage for the Bitcoin realm. What did we see here? Saganay Sank says, bummed to see that Walter Kern and Matt Taibbi stopping ATW. It was my favorite news show after Nolan. Well, thank you, Saganay Sank, but I didn't know they had stopped. That's news to me. They haven't stopped their newspaper, though, have they? Let me know in the comments if you know anything more about that. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I'm a fan of both of those guys, but there you go. BTC at 69,000 US trash tokens. Hey, isn't it funny that we're about to have the 20 millionth Bitcoin mined, which means we'll only have 1 million Bitcoin left, but simultaneous to that, we'll be at the millionth block. What happens if we have 1 million Bitcoin left when we hit the million block? Isn't that funny? We'll find out. Who knows? But it's hilarious to think about. Good morning, Chatelet, ES Empire. Good morning, gang. Charlosky says, good morning, wake up, gang. Noam Chomsky fanboys in shambles today. Nolan, I think your prediction of the Dem Party never coming back is not so crazy. I'm more convinced than ever. I think we're seeing a circling the drain situation here. We're going to talk about it today. Pretty sure they're done by the time November comes around, which is not a good thing, right? It's a good thing in a way, of course, that party in particular. But you want two parties. You don't want one party. So hopefully, as I've been saying, you have some form of division inside of the Republican Party that can take over going forward and become the actual fault lines. But we don't want to be saturated in politics as well. So maybe, if we go back to the old voting systems of landowners and net taxpayers being the only eligible voters, the Rhodesian system, the original American system, then perhaps you can have much more nuanced political policies, and you don't need it to be all aggregated down to two parties. That could be nice. Right now, as it is, though, as long as you're letting every sludge person vote, then you kind of need two parties, because you got to kind of then if to make any difference, you need someone like Trump to come along, who's so overpowered that he can change entire, huge sections of the population's point of view. I don't think we're going to be at that kind of leadership in the future, though. It's sort of a once in a generation situation. We're going to talk about that today as well, of course. So thanks for hanging in, sharing with us, JJ Fox. We love it. Janesville here. Are you going to Milwaukee meetup tonight? I am. People headed to the Milwaukee meetup. Châtelet, indeed. Escape the Matrix. No complaints, comments. No complaints, comments. Tune in Turtle Power. There you go. NC Suburban Mom back in the house. What a time to be alive. It sure is. Noah Simsa, I prefer not to dox myself when it comes to Bitcoin. That's always a good idea. Châtelet, Evan. Good plan, Noah says. Indeed. Sorry, bum fight, little out of the loop. What's all the silliness? It was one of the original low down dirty things that used to go on in pre-YouTube internet and pre-YouTube file sharing. There was a whole world of people being paid to fight that were homeless, and so you could download those videos. Lots of people did. They were on at parties from time to time. Bum fights, It was a pastime for many in the old days of file sharing, before, because the file sharing days, of course, had little censoring, or I'm not sure what was censored or what was going on. But there was a lot of stuff out there that you couldn't find once YouTube really started to take off in 2005, 2006. So I guess I'm on 20 years of YouTube this year. I was an original 2006 user, and then it ended up becoming like my music box, my DJ situation for the rest of law school. Because everything was already up and uploaded, and there weren't really copyright things back then, and everything was kind of on YouTube more or less already. It went pretty quickly, and it's all I used in college in order to listen to music at parties and stuff like that. So, and then just generally getting into the whole YouTube scrolling and everything else. Still my favorite form of entertainment, despite all the censorship, although I'm mixed in heavily now with Rumble. Still think that there's great stuff on YouTube. I just found last night was actually watching, I don't know if you guys know all of the free movies they put on YouTube these days, but the Kingdom of Heaven extended version, which people say is a masterpiece. I'd never seen it. It's on YouTube, and I watched about half of it last night. And it is excellent, all about the kingdom of Jerusalem and King Baldwin, the leper king, and really excellent stuff. So I enjoyed it a great deal and had to turn it off. I haven't enjoyed a movie so much as that in a long time. I had to turn it off in order to get to bed, because it's a 3.5 hour, over 3 hour situation. And so at around 10 o'clock, I said, okay, I can't really keep watching this. I'm not going to watch it till midnight, but I will be finishing it tonight. It was excellent. I really enjoyed it. So there you go. Better than bum fights. Much better. I've watched a few oldies on there too. Yeah, exactly. Rara 2000 says, when the pimps in the crib drop them like they're hot. You got it. Yeah. Oh, how interesting. Like slum fighting for fun and money. Where was I? Never saw that. Sounds fun. Do tell. It was actually not that fun. I'm only saying it because I remember it, but it already seemed way overly exploitative for the amount of entertainment you got. But when I hear things like pedal bikes and prisoners fighting, it reminds me of a time, and I wouldn't have any of the icky feeling you had when you saw homeless people fighting for money. So it kind of washes away the morality when we're dealing with the pedal bikes. And so there you go. You want the pedal bikes to be Definitely feeling the pain. And it's okay if it's entertaining. I don't think anyone would mind it. Some drug dealers, put some fentanyl dealers in there, right? Fentanyl dealers versus the pedal bikes. And that'd be great. That would be great. Good morning, Johnny. Hope you're doing well. All right, everyone. Let's acknowledge we've got a major sunrise on our hands. The Sunrise Tech is fully operational. And we've got 68,000, or is it 69,000 Bitcoin US trash tokens, 69,000 US trash tokens for Bitcoin as of right now. Indeed, we're back above 69,000 US trash tokens for Bitcoin. We're doing great. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. I have some really fun NPC news headlines for y'all today. I think you're going to like them. Let's see what we got. It was one of those days where they're not always there, but when they're there, they sometimes come in numbers. And so we got good numbers today from them. So here we go. First up, guys, you're going to love this one. A French researcher, guys, you're going to love this. A French researcher has discovered what's behind the Atlantic's overheating. So this is what he did. He went and, of course, he's got a great data set on the history of the Atlantic Ocean's temperature, right? And then he found out it was a little bit up. It was a little warmer in the Atlantic Ocean, right? North, south, which side of it? Who knows? But then he found out, right, that no, this is even the best part. He's got a temperature reading on the Atlantic Ocean from 2020, and it's different than 2026. And he knows where it's different and why it's different, right? Of course he does. Of course he does. But he found out that it's the reduction in sulfur pollution over North Atlantic responsible for the marine heat waves. We need more sulfur pollution. We shouldn't have cut out the sulfur pollution, you guys. We need more sulfur in the ocean. Unfortunately, it's had a ill effect on the temperature. It's made it warmer. For some scientists, climbing warming driven by greenhouse gas emissions alone is not enough to explain the extraordinary overheating of the surface waters in the Atlantic. Guys, the surface water is going up. It's too hot in the Atlantic Ocean. All of it. All the Atlantic. It's just hot. We got a hot Atlantic Ocean. Oh, no. If that's not bad enough, wait till you hear about this. We got a Winter Olympics going on, guys, right? Everyone's watching the Winter Olympics. Bad news there, too. I don't even have gloves on. Someone has their gloves off. The gloves are off. The gloves are off. At the Winter Olympics, Olympic Town warms up as climate change puts Winter Games on thin ice. Guys, the Alps are too hot in the winter for the Winter Olympics. This type of February warmth for Cortina is made at least 3 times more like 3 times. You guys, you heard it was Australia has 5 times more likely to have a heat wave because of climate change. Look on the good side. Look on the bright side. Not too bright because that'll make it hot. You don't want it that hot, right? So just look on the slightly bright side, not the extra bright, the slightly bright side. It's only 3 times more likely in Cortina d'Ampezzo in Italy, right? Not twice as likely, not 5 times like stupid Australia, right? 3 times more likely. I definitely thought Jay Tucker went all the way from Virginia and he thought he'd be wearing layers. No, it turns out he had heated socks. Heated socks. None of it helped. You're in Italy. It's cold. The Olympics, screwed. Coping with varying climates across Olympic host cities. Unbelievable. Weather can affect competition at the Olympics. No way. No way. They're screwed. What else do we got? We got this one. All this Olympic Games stuff, guys. Wait till you see this. Wait until you see this. Terrible news, guys. Economic growth is still heating the planet. Is there any way out? Economic growth is eating the planet now. It's economic growth. Some people call it greenhouse gases. No, No, that's just part of it. It's actually called economic growth. They blamed it on the cows. They blamed it on their farts. They blamed it on their burps. The burps, as we remember, are much worse than the farts when it comes to the cows, the bovines. But no, that's all economic growth, guys. That's economic growth, and it's heating the planet. Rising GDP continues to mean more carbon emissions and wider damage to the planet. Can the two be decoupled? No. No. And why do I keep doing this? We got this next ones too. I got a few on Trump. Trump's having a good day for the NPCs. Trump RX prescription drug site, not a solution for many patients, experts say. Indeed, there are some patients that want to pay more. New websites lists only limited number of medications, and many of them cost less than generic form elsewhere. Stupid Trump. He tried to make medicine cheaper, but he didn't do all of it. And he didn't beat every price in the world. What an asshole. What an asshole out there. Look at him. Look at this. What do we know, right? He's promised reforms on the unusually high drug prices in the US, and he called the announcement the largest reduction in prescription drug prices in history at a press conference Thursday. Yet the site only lists 43 medications. Geez, he's the 45th and 47th president. The least he could have done is added a few more medications, right? Where is that in this article? They didn't even mention that. That's another thing you could complain about. He should have had symmetry between the number of presidents that he was, as well as the number of medications available on the website. What a jerk. What a jerk. That's what we know, right? Stupid Trump. What's he up to now? Now this, it's even worse. Look what the Europeans are saying. Look what the European experts are saying. Trump is a global wrecking ball, European security experts say. The organizers of the Munich Security Conference, Europe's main defense-related forum, said in a report that the President Trump is helping destroy the post-war international order. Guys, things were going so great. We had a wonderful post-war international order. Right? All you had to do was submit to Satanist pedal bikes. And there, boom, you had your post-war national order, but he came along and he wrecked it. He wrecked it. Unreal. The pedal bikers and the Satanists bigly complaining. And now I've got this as well. You wonder why the Washington Post has suffered. Right? It's because of articles like this from Cortina at the Olympics, long a bastion of tradition. Ice dance has begun to incorporate queer culture. Good for ice dance. It was always so obviously heterosexual. And now, above all, they've finally come out of the closet and are embracing the queer culture. Good for the ice dance folks. They looked so closeted until now. No one ever would have called them gay or queer. And now they can finally, in the open, proclaim it. Unbelievable that Jeff Bezos doesn't want to fund the Washington Post and this stellar journalism. They've got more, though. Don't forget. Now, a lot of you out there, if you're from Virginia, you're worried because of everything that's going on. They got rid of the criminal provisions for larceny and theft, and they've gotten rid of all kinds of protections for, in particular, people who are pedal bikes and do all that kind of stuff with kids. They got rid of all of their penalties they'd be getting and gave them new protections, thank God, right? And now, luckily, though, that administration, if you're worried about it, this is what we've got, right? This is the lieutenant governor. You're not going to believe it, guys. The Virginia lieutenant governor, right, holds a PhD in poetry, right? PhD in poetry. And, she's going to use that PhD in poetry to bring people comfort. Excellent news. Excellent news, right? 2 stories in today's Washington Post that illustrate why they've been losing money and laid off so many people. Sports article, as well as fawning over the new Virginia lieutenant governor for being Muslim with a PhD in poetry. That's success. Unbelievable. We need Jeff Bezos to not be posting, as I will say in a few minutes, about turtles. He should be supporting and losing at least $100 million a year on the Washington Post. Much better use of his time and money. Okay, so there's some funny stuff today, if that wasn't funny enough. There is some funny stuff in the Epstein files. I know a lot of it's depressing and dark, but we got to laugh when there's funny stuff too. We can't always look at the dark stuff, right? So there's some really fun ones today. So apparently, Epstein was talking with some sultan about a bionic penis. He was into bionic penises. So here we see today two men casually arranging bionic penis surgery for a sultan. And he says here, Sultan wants to replace bionic dick with new Swiss version. Wants different surgeon. You're joking, I hope. Nope. Goyim. He wants the bionic penis. He needs the bionic penis surgery. It's a real story. And there's also this where I guess Steve Bannon and Epstein were talking about Macron's boyfriend. And I guess this has been known for a long time, before anyone like Candace Owens was talking about it. So apparently here we find out that, they make a bunch of jokes in it, right? Funny stuff, I guess, right? But that's what people are saying. Here's what we know. Steve Bannon mocks Macron's boyfriend. Someone tells Bannon, along with some other tidbits, I was shown a photo of Macron's boyfriend. Ah, hypocrisy. Is that true? The soldier replied, gives new meaning to I have your back or remember the French stand behind you. Yuck. So funny stuff. And we love to see the funny stuff in the Epstein files. And indeed, it's important to laugh at some of this stuff. I think no other way, because taking, as bad as all this stuff is, as dark as it is, as difficult as it is to read some of these things and the questions that it brings up and the realities that come from it, you got to remember that we're on the timeline that many Bitcoiners told you we'd be on, that many Bitcoiners have been cognitively preparing for. And this is what the fiat apocalypse looks like. So we've been down this road for many years now. And that's why it's important, I think, anyway, and why I always arrange this show to, make sure we're lighthearted and we're definitely keeping a pleasant attitude in order to not get completely stressed out all the time. And Alicia Long here, I'll show you, had a really good post on this saying, retard maxing is maximum cognitive security for the modern world. I've been talking about cognitive security for a long time. So what she said here is, you weren't outraged by the halftime show. You smiled and watched women dance and get a nice test boost. So we did yesterday say it was kind of funny that the Bad Bunny, was Bad Bunny? Is that what it's called? That the halftime show was, at least simpatico with my worldview and my security view for the American continent. It looked like it was Dunroe Doctrine stuff, which is what I told you yesterday. And I made sure no one got outraged by the Super Bowl halftime show. Don't really care about what happens at the Super Bowl in general or at the halftime show. I did not really watch it. I'm glad there's competition. I don't have a problem with that either. If people want to make a Kid Rock version of the show, if Turning Point USA wants to do an alternative halftime show, and if Americans want to be divided over which halftime show they watch, don't care. It's not really a big deal. I won't get angry at Bad Bunny for this and that, although it was obvious there was a lot of political messaging. That's not the point. The point is, and if you see how Trump operates, and we're going to talk about that in just a few seconds, if you see how Trump operates, the outrage itself and the statements themselves that cause the outrage are what makes the story persuasive. So if you don't feed outrage into the system, you're not going to get the desired political outcome. So you don't get mad about what Bad Bunny said, and they're not going to get their way. Get mad about it, and you're going to get your way, and they're going to get their way. Alicia Long goes on and says, not surprised or dismayed about the Epstein files. You knew we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against evil in high places. Evil people run shit and they win when they destroy your spirit. And then Alicia goes on, Bitcoin dropped and you watch and smile because rule number one, they always come back. Crypto, women, opportunities, sunny days, indeed. The idiot and his intellectualism can never understand this. Those blinded by thought always miss what is so obvious for the short bus conquistador. Ride the tiger. And I think that's just a great message. I've been focused on my own cognitive security and helping you folks have the cognitive security that you need to traverse this difficult time. We are deeply in the middle of World War III, a economic and psychological war, and therefore having sunny days and sunny ways is a definite strategy to survive and thrive in this time of change. Because if you got stressed about every little thing all the time, we would not be anywhere productive and we would be living with total cortisol saturation, and we would be a little too stressed out to do anything about it. Because just like I said, right, here's an example of how Trump operates, and he's doing it again with the hockey thing, right? So just look at how this worms its way into the Canadian mind. So here's Trump, and again, this is just some of the greatest persuasion you're ever going to see. This is Trump, full power Trump, right? And again, why I continue to predict that Canada cannot survive this, because he chose Mark Carney, and he's now targeting his persuasion towards Canada. So I was actually involved in some of this bridge stuff because it came through the committee that I worked on when it was first getting settled. We did not do the final version of it, and this was not how it appeared. Now, Trump, what he's saying here is Canada owns the bridge. Often what happens in this case is the tolls, it's kind of shared in the sense that one bridge will go to America, the next one goes to Canada, the next one goes to America. So even to this day, if you cross at the Thousand Islands, if you cross up in Ogdensburg by at the very north part of New York as it gets over to Ontario, or you cross a little further south in Gananoque, there's a bunch of bridges. And my understanding was this bridge was American, this bridge was Canadian. Some the Canadians collect the tolls, some the Americans collect the tolls. The Ambassador Bridge being another one where the Americans collected the tolls. Some dude has owned it forever, and it's a private bridge, which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And so this was just in the, my turn situation here. Canada wanted an extra bridge because the traffic was so bad, and it's kind of one-way traffic a lot of the time. It's Canada into the United States, so it was more important for Canada to fix this problem. So they built the bridge, and usually that's the way it worked. If you built the bridge, you got the tolls. Never really that political in terms of who gets what for which bridge. So Trump complaining that the bridge is Canadian and that Canada, who financed it, will get all of the revenue from it. But again, that's not what's persuasive here. What's persuasive here is that he goes after the hockey thing again, which is just perfect, right? It's just perfect because you can see exactly how Trump's persuasion functions and operates. And you can see why those people who don't have and don't seek out cognitive security are going to get trapped by this so quickly. But it's actually going to be like some kind of mind virus that goes through the Canadian mind because they have no immunity to it anymore. They used to be good at sifting through what was American media bullshit and not, but whatever is left of Canada has just become too retarded to be able to resist any of this persuasion and to be able to tangle with these kind of psychological games that Trump is playing here. So remember, Trump chose Mark Carney, right? That you have to understand that. That's first and foremost what's important to understand. Trump deliberately tanked the conservative leader in Canada for many reasons for which I agree. He's a coward. I've known him for a long time. He's still of that Stephen Harper, the previous Prime Minister of Canada's mindset that if he keeps message discipline with the Canadian media, they'll somehow one day respect him and treat him well. And it's just cowardly, right? It's why I understood Trump from the beginning. The minute I heard the Mexican rapist speech back in 2015, I said, well, that's probably the only way you can beat these folks. I knew that the Harper administration, when they gained the majority government that they so longed for in 2011 in Canada, had one opportunity to seize that opportunity, a lot like what we're going to talk about later with the SAVE Act in the United States. You had one opportunity in Canada, and they had to destroy the CBC when they had the chance. They had to throw the Ring of Mordor into the fiery pits of Mount Doom and stop evil fake news forever in Canada. And in the end, that didn't work. And in the end, that's exactly what the next election, the 2015 election, and pivoted around. I had already left because I knew they had no hope, even though on paper it looked like they were still going to win. They were wildly popular and they had nothing but wins as far as making Canadians richer. Remember, in 2015, around the time I moved to the United States, it was already a very lateral move for me as a Canadian. New York City didn't seem expensive, didn't seem like the people were making more money. It seemed very analogous to my own living situation in Toronto at the time. Nowadays, I think it would be almost impossible for most normal people to go from where I was, which was kind of the startup world, straight to New York City, because just getting out of Canada seems so expensive if you're stuck in Canadian salaries and stuff like that. Now, there's plenty of places in the world and the United States you can go to because Canada is so expensive to live in. But New York City is now, much worse inflation than Canada, and the folks there are making so much more money now over the last 10 years that it's just a world apart. So what was once analogous, the two largest cities of either country, and the sort of lateral ability to move between them, that's gone and erased. And so that's just the first sign of what's going on. So at the time in 2011, when I told the Harper government they needed to get rid of the CBC or just stop funding it or sell it or do whatever you got to do, but stop subsidizing people who hate you, stop subsidizing the media that runs psychological operations on your people because they hate you. And they weren't going to do that. And Mark Carney is not at that skill level. And when you look at Pierre Poilievre and Trump, when, like I said, Trump chose Mark Carney because he can't really operate without a fake news. He can't really operate outside of that framework. Pierre Poilievre was still running inside of that framework, and again, not being very nice to Trump because he was calculating. That's what they're always like, these cowards, right? They look at their stupid polls and like sludge people ooze from one side to the other. And because they don't really have any opinions. It's the Groucho Marx comment, the famous Groucho Marx joke, right? I have my principles, and if you don't like them, I have some more. I have more. Don't worry about it. That's kind of what these folks are like, especially Canadian conservatives. They're weak like Republicans in the United States. And so a lot of these folks back then said, well, we didn't run on a mandate to destroy the CBC. And I said, doesn't matter. Who cares? Just get rid of it. Who cares what mandate you have? You have a majority government. Get rid of this huge cost, which is billions of dollars for television. So stupid. And so this guy, Pierre Poilievre, still existed within that old world that is already gone. And Trump, as he does, always shows you the largest delta between how he treats you if you treat him well and how he treats you if you treat him poorly. If you treat him poorly, you're going to get the same in return, but with multipliers on top. The conservative fella, Pierre Poilievre, refused to embrace Trump, refused to embrace MAGA, and so he had to eat shit sandwiches after shit sandwiches in the typical Trump way. I don't even know his name. He's a loser. I never think about him. I never talk about him, which is the exact way to treat a weak Canadian conservative leader. He chose Mark Carney because Mark Carney is the accelerationist towards the end of Canada. And now that Trump has Mark Carney where he wants him, now that it looks like Mark Carney is going to try for another election so that he can get a majority government, because Mark Carney was only elected to a minority government, which means you don't get 4 years. You get as long as Parliament supports you. And his time is maybe up soon. The whole Parliament in Canada is very weak. But Trump here definitely trying to accelerate things. And you can see this importance now of cognitive security, because look at what Trump does. It's completely insane, right? He comes out and he says, Prime Minister Mark Carney wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. We'll just get the leftovers. I don't think so, he says. The first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada. He did this last week, but he's doing it because this is how comedians function. If comedians notice, they get a laugh. If they notice a reaction, that's good content. And Trump has always made his policies this way. This is something he's done for a long time. And if you don't know that, then you risk falling into Trump's completely insane frame. So he comes out here and says that they'll permanently eliminate the Stanley Cup. China is going to eliminate ice hockey and the Stanley Cup. Now, what are the effects of this? Of course, you see what the effects are immediately. You've got stupid fake news that has to come out in Canada and write things like this. Trump bizarrely claims China will terminate all ice hockey in Canada and threat to block new border bridge, right? So he bizarrely claims. It's not bizarre at all. It's a game. He's playing a game, and the game is get people to pay attention. Now, how does this function? People pay attention. They say, oh, they got this bridge thing now. That's not the game. The game is Trump's persuasion, which Scott Adams always called moving past the sale, right? Moving past the sale. Trump did this with the famous Mexico will build the bridge. Well, build the wall, right? Mexico will build the wall. Who's going to pay for it? Mexico will pay for it. Not only does it get you past the point of wondering and debating whether or not we need a wall, because you're past that, he's on to who's paying for it. Once you're on to who's paying for it, you've already accepted that the wall is getting built. And so when Trump comes out and says this, that hockey is going to be banned if they make a deal with China, of course it's crazy. It's insane. It's not true. There's nothing even remotely connected to it, right? So it could never and will never happen, obviously. And obviously Trump knows this as well. However, what it forces the brain to do is say, no, they can't do that, but you're already measuring how much of an effect China could have on Canada. So you'll say, well, they can't ban ice hockey, but, and then your brain starts filling in the blanks to see if they could ban ice hockey, but what could they ban, right? You say, no, it can't ban ice hockey, which is true, but you start wondering what they could ban. And it doesn't take long to understand that and to get people to start talking about China and Canada and sovereignty. And this is something that the fake news won't talk about to begin with. So Trump spikes their drink with this kind of insane psychological manipulation. And it forces people into measuring exactly what China can do and can't do to Canada. So just another pod guy, he knows what's going on. He says, we are in the piss off the Canadian phase, which will quickly lead to the Canadians double down leaning into China phase, which will be ultimately followed by the Trump will crush the Canadian economy very publicly like a bug phase, serving as a warning for anyone contemplating continued transshipment transgressions once they are enforced. So it's why I've been predicting the end of Canada for some time, and why I think, here's just another pod guy writing that, why I think at this point it is absolutely inevitable. There's nothing the sludge people can do. There's nothing the stupid CBC can do. They're going to fall for these traps again and again and again. And that's because they haven't learned about retard maxing. They've got to be retard maxing way more in Canada. Because if they retard maxed, they would just say, Trump said something about hockey, ha, ha, ha. But they're never going to do that because they're way too jacked. They're way too anxious about it all. They're way too brainwashed and full of cortisol and full of all of these terrible, terrible afflictions. Now, they still listen to legacy media, and Trump understands that, and that's why he's spiking it. So it's an important distinction, because Trump is able to manage so much by at once infecting people's cognitive security, right? Getting beyond the walls, getting outside of the parameters. We saw him do this with Epstein files, right? Epstein files was Trump using kayfabe, using wrestling techniques, using drama, getting people sucked into the story, because we're in a psychological and economic war. And that's why we always measure the capacity of the media to persuade, because we're actually talking about who can persuade more, who can create the psychological games that are more powerful in order to shift people into one direction or the other. And Trump is just the best at this. So when Trump is going with the bridge in China situation, or the bridge in Canada situation, and saying that China is going to ban ice hockey, it sounds crazy. Of course, it sounds crazy, but that's why it works, because Trump knows that Canadians can't retard max. They're just not capable. They don't have retard max gear. They have intellectualism, and they went to school, and the experts say, and just look at what position that leaves you. And even with this, right, like Alicia Long talking about Bitcoin dropped, right? We were talking yesterday about a Jemima Kelly, right? And Legacy News and how pathetic they are. I shared this years ago when it first came out, but listen to who we're dealing with here, right? This is a Legacy News journalist from the Financial Times. Listen to how she speaks. Listen to the type of person you're dealing with. This is the type of person that in 2015 was writing about Bitcoin's failure. It dropped 100 US trash tokens. This is the same person who wrote that article over the weekend about it being 69,000 US trash tokens too high, but then they had to revise the tweet to be 70,000 because it had gone up already 1,000 US trash tokens. Listen to how she speaks for a second, and you'll understand who we're up against and why there's no stopping us from winning, and why we are absolutely annihilating the legacy media when it comes to psychological persuasion and, again, economic persuasion. We're in an economic and a psychological war as Bitcoiners, and even in the markets, right? Anything to do with the news, anything to do with markets, these are the battlefields of World War III, and we're in the middle of it. And so this is a supposed participant in World War III. But if this doesn't encourage you to understand how hard we're winning, I don't know what else will. Listen to her. It's like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 likes, 11 likes, 11 likes in 41 seconds. That is a like every 4 seconds. She says the word like every 4 seconds. This is a sludge person. This is what they're like. This is what they're like. Okay, like. This is it. So how much persuasion can you possibly cram into 40 seconds when every 4 seconds you have to say the word like? It's none. It's zero. It's zero. It is a zero. That's why the censorship, that's why all this other stuff, because they're left with sludge people like Jemima Kelly who say like every 4 seconds and then say, I'm more informed than you because I've been in it for 10 years, making the same retarded mistakes for 10 years. 10 years she's doing the snarky, you don't understand it. I understand it. This is a retarded person. And that's why they can't win. And you're seeing it again. Yesterday, all the story, China curbing exposure to US treasuries. It's a global paradigm shift. Peter St. Onge points out China goes nuclear, telling banks to sell treasuries, and nothing happens. Like when China banned Bitcoin in 2021, after which it popped by a third. They don't have as much power as they imagine. Indeed. That's why, again, cognitive security is so important. That's why understanding this stuff, understanding the engine behind the economy, that it is a psychological engine, that the propaganda, that the arguments, the quality of thought, the quality of the mind is important. And when you look at someone like Jemima Kelly, who can't go 4 seconds without saying the word like on stage in a debate, and you realize this is a person who doesn't understand anything about the engine of the economy, about the psychology that goes on, and can't persuade anyone to see it from her point of view either, unless she has some baked in distribution from Financial Times, which is shrinking and shrinking and becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. I still remember we had a Financial Times journalist on stage back in 2017, and that journalist was being interviewed or was interviewing Eric Voorhees. And the journalist flippantly said something like the scam that was Silk Road. And Eric Voorhees just stopped the questioner that moment from Financial Times and said, "What do you mean scam?" And, well, they were scamming. And he goes, no, they were selling drugs. That's not a scam. You got your drugs. If you spent Bitcoin, you got the stuff, right? How's that a scam? This were consenting adults, and they'd found a forum to exchange value and goods. What's a scam about that? He goes, well, they were arrested. He goes, yeah, that's not the scam. That they were arrested. That Ross Ulbricht was arrested is not the scam. That doesn't make him a scammer. He's out. The president pardoned him now. We see 10 years later, very obviously pardoned him. And Eric Voorhees stopped him right there and says, "You're fake news. You are fake news for even thinking of it as a scam." That is right there how fake news operates. You have to understand the engine of fake news and how it functions and how it operates in order to understand the kinds of results it gets. Now, the good news is Bitcoiners do have an understanding of media literacy. We do have an understanding of financial literacy. We see these things as systems. We see these as an engine. And that's why we're able to jump in and understand at once cognitive security and at the same time what is actually going on in the financial system. We have a framework. We have a peer-to-peer information network in order to monitor it, in order to think about it. And we're able to see it like an engine. And the person who, one person who taught us, who's not a great Bitcoiner, does hold some Bitcoin, but here's Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio was on the Tucker Carlson show yesterday. I'm going to try and make this a little bigger. And here he is doing his regular talk where he's discussing how this is, hold on, I'm getting some kind of, who messages me during my show? Who does this? Oh no, this is a real person. Okay. I thought that was a fake person for a second. I got a few messages. Okay, I'll be right back. I'll get to those later. Audio not coming through? Is that what you just said? The audio can't hear? Very low, no sound for me. Okay, let me do it over again. You got to hear her. She's too good. Let me figure out. Okay, so you got to hear it because it's great. Okay, tell me if the audio comes.
The Bitcoiners, why are they the experts in monetary theory and how to do better politics and how to solve failing democracy? Why? So you're saying that journalists aren't well trained enough? Well, so a Bitcoiner, that they the people that we should? I don't get that. I hear what you're saying. If you want to make criticism, you need to be
informed.
Well informed, right?
Yeah, right?
And I believe I am. I've been writing about Bitcoin for probably a lot longer than a lot of people here have been into Bitcoin, right? I've been writing about it since 2015. A lot of people, you probably got into it later than that, right?
Much later.
Yeah, there you go. So it's not that I don't understand it. It's just that
better than you do, though.
The Bitcoiners, why are they the experts in?
So there you go. There was 10 likes in that 41-second clip. I hope you heard them all because they're hilarious. And she sounds Trans Valley. Turn her off. Turn her off. She's turned us all off. Don't worry. Don't worry. So indeed, here's a video of, and again, the importance that Bitcoiners can consume this content. We can understand this content, that we have some framework for what's going on. And I like Ray Dalio for the most part. Very few instances I've seen of him being treacherous or deceitful or hating America. He's been sort of reading the same book for years. He looks passionate about it. I've always loved his video that treats the economic engine exactly like it is, like it's something like a motor inside of a car. And, even in my own, when people ask me what jobs do we do in the future and what jobs are there, first of all, I'll say the old jobs are the new jobs. So mother, father, be good at those, husband, wife. That's the most important thing, I would say. But going further to actual skills, carpenter, baker, these things I can imagine will all have some form of relevancy going forward. But I still tell people I don't think lawyer is going to be a job necessarily going forward, but a legal education, having an understanding of if then, having an understanding of logic and syllogisms and consequences, especially when you're writing, because we write laws as codes, right? So you write a law as a code the same way you would write coding. Now, I don't think coding's a job anymore either, but it is an understanding of how if then constructs work. It is an understanding of the consequential nature of how you're writing. It'll make you good at all kinds of things. And the way I always described it is what I got out of law school is that you actually can see politics and news and you get the framework to be able to understand this stuff as if it's an engine where you can say, I can move this piece, I can move this piece. If I move that, we're going to have trouble. If I put something there, it'll work more, it'll be optimized. And I definitely appreciate that Ray Dalio has shared this almost legalistic understanding of economics and the financial system. He has a real mechanic, a real car mechanics understanding of what's going on. Doesn't mean he gets everything. I think his blind spot about Bitcoin is still obvious, because here again in this whole system, he's going on still about how China can take over in the future and how relevant that is and what that means. He definitely does take issue with the CBDCs. You like to see that. He's got a few good lines here. Him here talking about who actually controls the money, I think is important. Should we worry about a civil war here is another good one. I don't worry about a civil war too much. I think we're already in one. It's psychological and economic. I think he's a little too far away from the metal to see the physical nature of how a war would play out. I don't think it would play out very long. It's not like the last Civil War. I think it's over within minutes. 3 trucks and a little American draft, a couple good old boys from the South, a couple of Texan ranchers, a couple of inner city gangbangers, and 3 trucks. And I'm pretty sure we can end the Civil War by shutting down New York City. You put 1 truck in the Lincoln Tunnel, 1 truck in the Holland Tunnel, flat tires, one on the George Washington Bridge, and suddenly Manhattan's closed. And most of them are there. So that's the end of the war, I guess, right? That's how I would see it playing out if it ever got close to that moment. But here's Ray Dalio talking about who controls the money. And I thought this was
in a society like ours, where is the money? Who has the money? Is it the same people who have the wealth?
No. Many people have a lot of wealth and don't have much money. They have illiquid assets.
Yes.
Okay. Money is that what you can transact? Currency, short-term deposits that you can assuredly and quickly turn into money. That's what money is.
Yes.
And the central bank really controls the money. And then you could look at who has that increasingly, like you could look at M0, M1, and you could see money market accounts, and you could see those very liquid, money, safe money, treasury bills, those kinds of things. And so that, but ultimately it's the central bank because they control the supply demand.
So, if in a period of volatility, it would seem like the central bank would clamp down on the money supply circulating among people.
Well, it faces the trade-off, right? The trade-off is like in, let's say, COVID.
Right.
So the point is, he gets what's going on. He understands how it's architected, but I always find he still misses that piece about Bitcoin. He's there explaining currency, money. He's going into intellectualism. He's going into the overly engineered way of viewing the world. when things are a lot simpler and not necessarily as complicated as he's saying. That's sort of a fallacy you go down when you think of economics as something more than a series of incentives and the psychological engine that perpetuates it. Luckily, Bitcoiners, through our peer-to-peer information network, have figured this out for the most part. And we always understand at the end, just have hard money. Have money that can't be printed, separate money and state for these reasons. And you can see here that the road America is currently going down is altering what Ray Dalio is saying here. And that's been the project Bitcoiners have been working on since 2009. And here Balaji is underlining exactly why this hard money story is so relevant, because it happened before. Here's Ben Landau Taylor saying, I didn't appreciate how close the crisis of the 3rd century came to ending the whole thing for good. It was on the path of a standard late imperial crack-up. Then a handful of great leaders managed to stitch enough of it back together so it could hang on for centuries. And he's reading Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And Balaji adds to it, true, but they just delayed the inevitable. The debasement was underway. Then hard men reintroduced hard money. So he's saying to Ben Landau how they were able to do this was a changing monetary system. That's what Ray Dalio is saying, but in way too many words, and still within the old paradigms and with the old understanding of the engine. He's basically, in my analogy, although we don't like to think in analogies, he's basically talking about a combustion engine while we're headed clearly into a supercapacitor electronic world to power vehicles, not combustion engine. And so thinking of it in terms of nation states is missing the point. We've completely changed the gas inside of the psychological engine that will perpetuate it forward. That's why cryptographic keys themselves in an era of the internet are so powerful and so important. Why I've been saying for a long time, the only subject larger than Bitcoin is the trickle down of the power of cryptography to the individual. And I don't mean cryptocurrencies, I mean cryptography. And that Bitcoin has made cryptographic keys currency. We've made keys into currency. And that's a big, big change in the psychological engine, because it allows you to have all of these moments of privacy and confidentiality, and it really keeps the power inside of you and gives us the leverage to separate money and state, because you don't need credentialism, you don't need Financial Times, you don't need any of these folks to tell you how and when and if. You can just do it. So Balaji here is, close to the metal on understanding this. He says, then hard men reintroduced hard money, the siliqua and the solidus, but that actually caused a shock. Rome was used to inflation via taxation. Now they had to raise real taxes. So the burden of empire became visible, and Rome still went to zero in 476. So here's the money coming in, and the new coin, of course, that was made of gold and was made of silver, Roman debasement of silver coins. That's what happened before, and they had to reintroduce hard money here. Funny, everyone's talking about these Olympic medals now, and I think the Olympic medals are just such a good sign and such a fortuitous sign of how much has gone wrong in the current system. It's a good proxy to understand. I think of the Olympics as one of these institutions that comes from that old world and that comes from this whole framework of fiat, international institutions. And let me see if I have it. I don't think I have it in my notes, but there it is. So it turns out indeed that the winter medals are already breaking. Here's an American who got their medal. Apparently there's way less gold in the gold medal. It's mostly silver. It's got a little bit of gold plating. It's got the same amount of silver as the silver medal. They say they're the most expensive medals in Olympic history, but that's just because gold has been repriced so much. So, it's just a good proxy to understand what's happened to these institutions. Imagine winning a gold medal at the Olympics, but then it rusts by the time you leave the Olympics, which is what happened in the last Winter Olympics, or Summer Olympics, I should say, in Tokyo. All the medals were shit, which shouldn't be a surprise, right? So indeed, we have a new system coming in, and it's important to understand, because you don't want to get stuck in the Ray Dalio you don't want to get stuck in the combustion engine analogy going forward. You want to realize a completely new system is being offered. And indeed, the Kevin Warsh appointment is part of this. So Brian Hoon Jong Paik says the following: the appointment of Kevin Warsh isn't random. It's architect. So the fake news is trying to say that Trump made a mistake. That's first up, right? He never said that, right? So the fake news was trying to say yesterday that Trump is already regretting Kevin Warsh chaos. Da, 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 da. Somebody said he made a mistake on his nomination of federal Kevin Warsh the last time because he was runner-up to Jerome Powell when he named him. But here we see from Brian Hung Jun Pek, Trump is installing a unified monetary team to execute one goal: aggressive American growth. Warsh will cut rates. Bessent will manage the debt. The liquidity spigots are about to open wide. Low rates plus high growth equals Bitcoin rocket fuel, and that is part of this new system. Indeed, this is what the subordination of the Federal Reserve looks like. That's not what I heard from Ray Dalio's interview. He's not even in that. He's just telling you how the machine works, and he seems a little bit stuck in his old way of understanding the machine without really acknowledging what is going on with the Federal Reserve and the subordination to Bessent. Because to me, this is the biggest story of 2025 with the audits and everything coming in 2026. We're going to talk about the audits in a second. You're going to see the two-pronged attack here, and don't trust, verify is about to become absolutely operationally important for American worldview and cognitive security. And that's the good news. And it's happening more and more. You're seeing here someone that was supposedly that Trump tried to appoint to the federal board before. But when Trump gets control of the federal board in May, I think you're going to see the pieces of the Mar-a-Lago Accord become very obvious. This lady here, I'd never heard of her before, Judy Shelton, but she sounds a lot like the Stefan Miron Mar-a-Lago Accord proponent. And this is what we know from her. In 1989, a researcher at Stanford published a book called The Coming Soviet Crash. 2 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. Her name was Judy Shelton, and she's been right about almost everything since. So here she says Shelton didn't predict the Soviet collapse from a newsroom or Senate office. She went through the Kremlin's own budget data and proved what nobody wanted to see. The empire was bankrupt. Rampant inflation, massive deficits, all hidden behind Marxist accounting. The book came out in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell months later. In 1992, while the West was handing Russian government to government bailouts through the IMF, Shelton published a different proposal. Give Russia a currency board, build a real monetary foundation. Let entrepreneurs lead, not bureaucrats. Russia ignored the advice. The result, oligarch default and a lost decade. Her mentor was Robert Mundell, Nobel Prize 1999. His work on optimum currency areas became the intellectual foundation for the euro. Sheldon didn't just study monetary theory. She studied under the person who redesigned how an entire continent thinks about money. Didn't do great. In 1994, she published Money Meltdown. The thesis: politically manipulated currencies will keep causing crises until the world adopts a sound monetary reform. Then Mexico devalued in 94, Asian currency crisis in 1997, Russia defaulted in 1998. Nobody cited her. Indeed, I was in Korea 5 years after the IMF currency meltdown there. And it's what allowed me to even understand Bitcoin when I got into it years later, because I didn't know anything about foreign exchange swapping and currency manipulation. And I would meet people in Korea, normal people, and they were always swapping coins for dollars or back and forth. And they were always trying to use these anticipated movements in foreign currency in order to make some money. And they would make, $100 just by slinging coins up and down. And so I thought that was very interesting that people could do that. And I didn't know anything about it. And so even just understanding what foreign exchange currency was going forward helped me in many ways and helped give me a framework to understand Bitcoin when I saw it. So she goes on here for 37 years. She published in the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and testified before the Senate Banking Committee, Senate Foreign Relations, House Banking, and the Joint Economic Committee. She was consulted on monetary issues by national security officials at the White House and the Pentagon. This is not a fringe voice. In 2020, Trump nominated her for the Federal Reserve Board. 130 economists signed a letter calling her views extreme and ill-considered. Seven Nobel laureates joined them. The same establishment that missed the Soviet collapse, missed the Asian crisis, and missed the 2008 financial crisis. They called her extreme. So again, cognitive security is important in these instances, and that's why predictions matter. Predictions, if you get them right, mean your worldview when you made the prediction was accurate enough to predict where things were headed, especially if it's an economist. If it's an economist they're understanding the psychological engine, they're understanding the incentives, and they're able to predict not just randomly what's going to happen, they're predicting what people are going to do. And if you can predict what people are going to do, you'll know what will happen. And that's the trick here. And that's why she's so good at it. November 17th, 2020, Senate voted 47-50. This was not long after they were already out arresting Arthur Hayes. They had already become snakes in the grass. Trump had already lost. Susan Collins and Mitt Romney broke ranks. Chuck Grassley and Rick Scott were absent, quarantined for COVID. Lamar Alexander was absent for a family matter. 3 votes, 2 absences, 1 pandemic. Kamala Harris flew back to DC specifically to vote against her. Shelton didn't give interviews about it, didn't write an angry op-ed, didn't go on a media tour. She went back to work, kept publishing, kept showing up. In 2024, she published Good as Gold, a framework for how the US dollar could be backed by gold again, not by returning to 1944, by using modern financial instruments, a gold-backed treasury bond issued on American terms, settled with today's technology. What she says there is more or less the bit bond that's coming. What she says there, a gold-backed treasury bond, remember, that fits in line with what I've been saying is the subordination of the Federal Reserve to the Treasury. If the Treasury figures out a vehicle in order to sell bonds like the bit bond, like the gold-backed treasury bond, what you do then is you separate interest from the fiat currency. That's how you make the fiat currency into food stamps. That's how you absorb all of the inflation into the hard money. If you do that, if you sell these bonds, if you sell a gold-backed bond. So she wrote this paper to Trump. I was involved in writing a very similar paper, which Trump read about the bit bond. So it was signed by several Bitcoiners. I don't want to share their names, but this came to my desk before it went out. And I fixed a bit of the language, cleared it up a little bit, and was involved in getting this on Trump's desk. This is as he's naming Bessent. This is in that period just after he won. I've seen the bit bond up close. I know exactly what it's going to look like. And I can guarantee in the next year, once you see Bessent take full control, and by May, when the Federal Reserve really goes into its subordinate position, if they drop interest rates in order to get interest up, literally interest up in bonds, how do you make them interesting if there's no interest? How do you make U.S. bond issuances from the Treasury interesting if you can't put interest on the dollar that's part of it? Because you're selling dollar, you're getting dollars from this, right? You're selling the bonds for the dollars. So how do you make it interesting without interest rates? You put something like gold or Bitcoin in it, and the actual gold and Bitcoin is what you get back after 10 years. So the inflation that goes into the Bitcoin, the inflation that it absorbs, the value that goes up in the Bitcoin is yours in 10 years. It's forced hodling. And you get the same amount of dollars back, right? You don't get any interest in the dollars, because these instruments have to mimic what's going on with the actual interest rates. And so how do you make it interesting? You put something interesting in it, like Bitcoin. I know I'm deliberately using the word interest interchangeably, as in who's interested and what's the interest rate, but that's really what it is. You don't need the Ray Dalio economic engine look for that. You just have to understand plain language and understand that this new system that is being proposed is on the doorstep. This woman is another one of these people who understand that power is headed to the Treasury, and it's headed to the treasury quickly and will be exercised with these very powerful and important instruments. Another person who was definitely aware of the bit bond, he was on TV yesterday talking about much the same, why you're able to understand, why we're able to see and understand that if Bitcoin is part of the formula absorbing all of this inflation and the big print coming, why these instruments are calibrated the way they are. And Bill Miller the fourth here on television on CNBC yesterday, understanding and sharing this knowledge about why it is coming in this direction. So there's another guy who was aware of all this and has been talking about it. But ultimately, we need to get away from this overly academic, overly credentialist way of understanding the system. It is a lot simpler than we've been led to believe. It's a lot simpler than we've understood from the sludge people in academia and the credentialists. And ultimately, the world that Bitcoin wants to usher in is not more Bill Millers, although I love Bill Miller the fourth. It's not people who understand the floor, the production cost, liquidity from the bank to the commercial bank to the central bank, and what's going on and the rate of return. And it's all too much. It's all too much. And that's what's led to the best and brightest going into financial engineering for years. It's the highest paid job, and it has created this entire inside baseball world where the language and the physics is absolutely impenetrable to most people, because you have to exist within this entirely separate linguistic and psychological frame. Which is why here's Stefan Livera. I think with what we've been saying for a long time here, we need a monetary system where you can actually just save the money. For a long time now, that hasn't been true. People have been forced to engage in debt and equity investments, even if they are not professionals. Of course, TradFi is more than happy to skim fees off of you. And that's exactly it, right? You need to be able to lower the cognitive load to participate in the economy. And that is one of the easiest ways to predict why Bitcoin is going to win and why Bitcoiners are going to win, because it's just much simpler. Bitcoin is not as complicated, because as we go down this road of bit bonds and what's going on, of course, this liminal space of transitioning to a Bitcoin standard will still have complexities. We're not going to get rid of all of them overnight. We're still trying to get it out of the system in a slow and gentle way, right? This is the gentlest way that we can get to hyper Bitcoinization. And because you don't want it overnight. Overnight is probably too shocking for most people. Things would settle down, but probably in decades. And I don't think many of us want to live through that. There's probably a better way to do it that preserves a lot of human dignity and life. And I think that's the system we want. But also, we don't want to keep sacrificing the people who just want to make a chair and want to be good at making chairs, but can't do that because they got to get on the risk curve in order to trade and to stay ahead of the game, because the chair they just spent 2 years making has already been inflated and no one can afford it, and you have no buyers and no one who cares about the aesthetic or the craftsmanship. because people's subconscious is completely wrecked by consumption and all of these other factors. So indeed, we're starting to understand and we're starting to decouple from this whole world where Bitcoiners are starting to see, right, the cognitive security, the retard maxing, really important, the just bell curve that we've always seen, the lowest IQ and the highest IQ buying Bitcoin, the middle folks. Oh, but Jemima Kelly from the Financial Times, who said that I didn't I'm not an expert. That whole aspect is really where the tension lies and really where the fault lines are in World War III. And the good news is, and I think this does go a long way to explain what's happened in the past couple of days with Bitcoin. It looks like Bitcoin and crypto are starting to diverge. You're seeing a lot of the Bitcoin or the crypto exchanges moving towards prediction markets to go straight into gambling because the crypto casino stuff ain't working that well. Marty Bent here commenting on the Super Bowl ad from Coinbase. Apparently, it was another rug pull. I'm not as anti Coinbase as a lot of people, but of course, I wish it was something else. And here we see Marty Bent saying the Coinbase Super Bowl ad proved what we already know. Crypto is a scam. Everybody knows it. You saw from the audience who was upset when they said it was a crypto ad. Indeed, we're getting more and more folks. Now, one thing I will say that I did not appreciate about Marty Bent's whole article here, not that I don't like it necessarily, but here he says, tech innovation, proof of work. The beauty is found in its simplicity. That simplicity makes monetary properties ironclad. Millions of tokens have come and gone over 17 years, and none have come close to Bitcoin's success. But this is what's important, right? He talks about blockchains and this and that. This is where I disagree with him. So here he says the whole base and Farcaster craze is a great example of that meme falling flat on its face. For these particular use cases, he's talking about digital money for the digital age. It doesn't make sense to spin up a token to monetize YouTube or podcast content. He says what you need is distributed content mechanism like RSS feeds combined with sound digital money like Bitcoin. Podcasting 2.0 does this beautifully. Put a lightning address in your RSS feed and people can stream sats to the creator directly. You don't need a Marty token or a TFTC token. Now, he is somewhat right, and I've loved the Rumble wallet for that reason. I think it's a great innovation, but I continue to believe you need a two-sided market for this stuff. I continue to believe you need a market where, with all the AI slop out there, that you've got people who are able to pick what content is good and get paid in actual Bitcoin for having a good taste making sense and a good aesthetic. I just think that there's the whole one-way donation thing doesn't work. It's not bad, but it doesn't really work. It's the same model that we've been looking at for a while. And I do think that simplifying things so that you have a two-sided market is important because we got to win the culture war. We have to win the war where Bitcoiners are more entertaining, that spending time with Bitcoin content is more rewarding, and that there is some form of taste-making and harnessing of the Bitcoin P2P information network when it comes even to entertainment. So I just think there is some form of revenue sharing that has been unexplored yet that I think crypto could handle. As you know, I've been talking about royalty payments in Bitcoin for a long time. I will never give up on the idea because I just don't think this tip thing is got legs in the long run. I think there's better systems out there that could reward people. Now, I get it. Speculation is because we're in the late fiat empire situation, but this is not just speculation. This is taste making and sharing your aesthetic. You want to basically kill the hipster affectation of, I only like them before they were popular, and now that they're popular, I don't like them anymore. What you don't want with that is, I mean, that's all they got, right? You want to make that person, just like people who are early to Bitcoin, you don't have to brag that you were early to Bitcoin. If you're bragging that you're early to Bitcoin, you probably weren't. What generally happens when you're early to Bitcoin is other people point to you and say, do you know that person when they got into Bitcoin? Do you know how early that person got into Bitcoin? And other people brag for you. Just like you can't call yourself an OG in Bitcoin. It's very cringe, right? To say you're an OG in Bitcoin. If other people call me an OG in Bitcoin, I don't mind that at all. But I won't say it about myself. I won't introduce myself as an OG in Bitcoin because there's plenty of people before me, right? It's not like I was first. I think the only person who can say they're an OG and it not sound cringe is if they were on the mailing list, and that's about it. I think after that, you got to have other people say it for you, and then, you know, to the extent that they believe you're an OG, that's fine. But you can't go and pump your own tires and say you're an OG. But you want other people to do it for you. And I think that that is the missing piece in the economic engine around content creation. So I think Marty is correct in some ways here, but I think there is some scheme out there that can unlock a lot of Bitcoin earnings, right? I'm talking about not some speculative coin. I'm talking about people earning Bitcoin by choosing good Bitcoin content. As you all know, I've written several books, so of course I'm self-serving on this issue, and I'm still building this in public. So we'll see. Maybe I'll be able to prove Marty wrong on this. Now, it's important because, you know, winning the culture war is a big deal, but we're already doing great. Look at this in El Salvador. We got Shakira showing up at the Bitcoin hardware store. I guess she's been doing a concert for the whole week out in El Salvador. Great for her. And here she is. She came to a Bitcoin micro class today in El Salvador. Isn't that great? Don't you love to see that? Don't you love to see Shakira at a Bitcoin class? Can't hear Bill Miller. Oh, geez. Sorry, Johnny Midas. I don't know why this is. I don't know what the problem is with this stupid sharing of audio on this platform. It says I can share it, and it makes no sense to me when I can't. So anyway, let me know if the Bill Miller audio came through when I read part of it. I thought of your coin. Yeah. There you go. Burn in hell, they say about Coinbase. Low volume, can't hear. No audio, my dude. No, okay, there you go. No shit. Well, here, I'll play it for you quickly because you had to hear it. I don't know why it's not playing. Really can't explain why. It's just him going on about metrics and stuff. It's not that important. Can you hear it now? So he goes on about all these metrics. There you go. Yeah, I see CB Van saying I always appreciated Coinbase for getting me into the game. Easy to use and understand platform. No sound still. Well, okay, anyway, I stopped it. Yeah, I mean, look, I will never be a full anti Brian Armstrong guy. He was generous and thoughtful in the early days of CoinDesk. You know, he's a human being to me, so it's hard for me to hallucinate reasons to not like him. I get it. I'm not a big fan of the business, and I don't promote people using it. That's not what I'm interested in. But I get why people would have used it in the early days, and I think it's a net positive. Although people are starting to hate it, I guess. So maybe that will change. But indeed, the reason I bring up why we've got to win this game, and this is sort of counter to what Marty said. You've got Mr. Beast, who we don't like, but saying that he's now getting into a financial services app. He acquired Step. Nobody taught me about investing, building credit, or managing money when I was growing up. That's exactly why we're joining forces with Step. I want to give millions of young people the financial foundation I never had. Lots to share soon. Very good news from Mr. Beast. I think you got Brad Mills in there saying Bitcoin had quite an important role in changing your life and the way you think about investing. Bitcoin is the future of money for young people and AI. I hope you had a good steward to propagate Bitcoin saving info. There you go. So we'll see. But here, Arjun says, I'm telling you guys right now, entertainment finance is a very real thing. I don't think people fully grasp how big this is. No one has better distribution than Mr. Beast. There's a reason why Tom Lee and Bitmine invested 200 million trash tokens into Beast Industries. Creator distribution, financial products completely dominate the legacy banking and financial services industry. Before long, this will be one of the biggest financial service companies in the entire world. I just believe it. It's the case because entertainment finance needs to make the job of picker real. That's what's missing, the two-sided aspect of the market. Just having people give you money because you make good content doesn't really work the same way as rewarding the people who picked your content early, with upside being Bitcoin. So important battle for Bitcoiners to win, I think. But the good news is the infrastructure is getting built, right? Here's this news by Cash App. Amazing stuff, David Marcus says. Now, Cash App could do it, right? Cash App has all the tools needed for this to happen. It wouldn't take much. But here's what we know from Cash App yesterday. We're making foundational changes that help make Bitcoin everyday money. 0 to low fee Bitcoin buys on Cash App. No fees on large Bitcoin buys. No fees on Bitcoin on recurring buys. No fee Bitcoin spending via Lightning Network. Higher withdrawal limits if you qualify. So indeed, they always keep your Bitcoin 1-to-1. I generally push people towards Cash App when they're just getting started. No distractions. I like that you can't trade it for crypto and that you can just focus on Bitcoin buying. But here's an interesting one on, that's all the Bitcoin infrastructure that's going on in. Look at the Epstein infrastructure that we've learned about from all of the Epstein files. This is a really good way of tracking it. So he says everyone is hunting for, this is Sayer G, and he did a great job here saying everyone is hunting for names in the Epstein files. This series tracks infrastructure. So we got to think of these things like an engine, right? And just as I've been saying, it's a psychological engine. You've got to think about cognitive security. You got to think of your peers in your group. You got to think about what you're building. You got to realize, as we do in Bitcoin, that saving money is a priority. Being able to have a money that is savable is a priority. Winning the culture war is a priority. We're doing great on that. And here, just now comparing the system that we're building up to the bit bonds and the treasury right down to the Cash App savings pieces, just understanding exactly what goes into that infrastructure lets us understand, just like I said with Ray Dalio, it's infrastructure, right? You see it as an engine. You can coordinate and calibrate the engine, all really important stuff. But look at the engine they were building. Look at the infrastructure they were building. I've been calling Epstein infrastructure for a few weeks now, and I think it's the only way to describe what he was. He was infrastructure in the sense that there was a reason why he wasn't worried about being caught in email, because it was a system, it was a framework, and that framework didn't have to fear any of the leaks that have come now when they were first made 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now that things have changed, we have a better understanding of this. But look at what was going on in the building parts of Epstein's network, not the names, not the sadist stuff, not the pedal bike stuff, what we see here, not the blackmail stuff even, just the actual infrastructure. So here, this is the framework, a visual index showing how financial structures, emergency governance, and censorship mechanisms evolved over time across institutions and crises. And this is what we've been talking about Mike Benz showing us the architecture of deceit. We're seeing inside of the financial system. That's why Mike Benz has been calling Jeffrey Epstein infrastructure for a while too. I stole that from Mike Benz. It's him who's been calling it infrastructure. It resonated with me. I believe it. But here's what we got. Each phase supported by primary documents, emails, contracts, policy actions presented sequentially so patterns become visible. And here's what we see. The architecture is built. This is the architecture of deceit. Starts with the project molecule. JP Morgan perpetual offshore fund, vaccine surveillance finance, private governance committees, billions for vaccines, 2014, the inflection point, Ebola, UN Security Council, threat to peace, military deployment, emergency powers, Gates, Obama emails to Epstein, UN proposals routed via Epstein, 2016, 2017, pandemic as investment, pandemic reinsurance, parametric triggers, WEF, Swiss Re, Merck links, 2020 COVID system activates, emergency declarations, global surveillance, NGO control layers, speech suppression, 2021 censorship infrastructure, CCDH, disinformation dozen, deplatforming, blacklists and lawfare, cross-border enforcement, 2022 to 2024 lawfare and control, parliamentary laundering, transnational lawsuits, journalists as targets. And that is what the infrastructure looks like. Here's Mike Benz talking about more of it, saying Microsoft and Bill Gates plus Steve Ballmer have given over 100 million US trash tokens to the Obama Foundation to destroy the right-wing populist party in Poland. In turn, Microsoft stands to make tens of billions of dollars if this Obama-led regime is successful. What philanthropy. And you can see here such philanthropy. You gave $7 million to Obama so his foundation can topple stable governments in Poland and Hungary to profit as Microsoft corporate donors. Indeed, here he says, every day I'm proud of Chair to Open Society, the proud son of George Soros. Over his lifetime, my father has committed the vast majority of his net worth to promoting justice, equity, human rights, and democratic practice around the world. The work matters. The work continues. And indeed, why is he never, and Forbes says, why Musk, Page, and Ellison aren't on the list? Too good. Now, again, always remember the architecture here. He's never, ever, ever had to explain this in an interview because he speaks like Jemima Kelly. Like he would go, if you you know how they make, the funniest thing people do, they'll put like a Chinese delivery lady with an Indian delivery food lady, and they'll make the phones talk and they can't figure it out, right? Or you've heard that scheme before. It just sounds like they can't understand what the other person is saying, and it's been used for comedy, right? We all think it's very funny. And so what would this be like, right? If these folks were, in a room chatting in the same way, if Jemima Kelly and Alex Soros were trying to talk, it would only be they would just be going like, and then you'd be in hell because that's all they would say. But you can see with all of this, understanding now the architecture of deceit, understanding the infrastructure that was built, understanding the new financial infrastructure is coming, understanding the psychological frameworks, and again, understanding that people align with power structures, right? This isn't an argument thing. Bitcoin wins when Bitcoin is synonymous with wealth, when Bitcoin is synonymous with winning, when Bitcoin is synonymous with winners. And that's the road we have to be on. That's why we've got to win the culture war. That's why we've got to win all of these things, because separating money and state comes down to that, right? That's why it's hilarious. Yesterday, of course, we heard about Macron, who's in the Epstein files, as we were mentioning, talking about the $30 million he has to lure AI developers to Europe, which is nothing in that world. These guys are negotiating billion-dollar contracts, some of the highest paid people in the history of the world, and he thinks 30 million wouldn't even get you one researcher, really, at the rates they're going at. 30 million is not enough for one person for 1 year based on the pay packages I've seen the Americans offer. But now he says he's going to be part of a move to get Euro bonds out. They're going to be issuing Euro bonds. They need more debt, they think, in Europe. It's time for the EU to sound a common debt capacity through Euro bonds. So France, which has a debt to GDP ratio too high for it to borrow more, they can't let enough immigrants in because it's already full, are now trying to get the euro to itself be able to take on bonds, which probably won't work. Who's going to show up? I just compared how to make the bonds issued from the Treasury interesting for people to show up. They add Bitcoin or gold to it because the interest rates are going to be too low to get anyone interested. What are they going to do in Europe? They're going to have to compete with the interest rates. Who's going to show up to buy the bonds if it's 1%? Nobody. So what are they going to do? Nothing. Not going to work. Just another scheme by this guy. And you got to think about that, because this is what the separation of money and state starts to look at. Look at the credibility of a government asking for a bond like France. Look at the credibility of the EU. The EU is not going to last 100 years. The EU is not going to last 30-year bond, 10-year bond. Would you buy a European Union 10-year bond right now in 2026 that's redeemable in 2036? You don't even, no one knows what Europe's going to look like in 2036. I wouldn't put any money into it. Meanwhile, and this is why it's important, and this is why winning the culture war is important, and this is why we can predict where things are headed in terms of separation of money and state. You know who can issue a 100-year bond? Google can. A private company can. Here, they're actually selling it as of yesterday, a 100-year bond. The inaugural SEC registered GBP denominated 100-year bond from Google. Sightbringer writing, Alphabet just crossed the line in corporate bond market, only touches when the system itself needs reassurance, quietly, deliberately. This is one of the few companies on the planet capable of testing belief at a century scale. A 100-year bond is a probe. It asks a simple question, a single question of the monetary system. Do you still believe in duration? For decades, sovereigns owned the long end of time. That monopoly is weakening. This is what the separation of money and state begins to look like. Now, you're going to see Bitcoin companies do the same going forward. Not because it needs the money, but because the market needs somewhere to put time. The choice of GBP matters. Sterling is being treated as a long duration clearing basin for global institutions that can no longer find safety in sovereign promises alone. Pension funds and insurers are resolving constraint, but that's not going to work. That's why these 100-year bonds are going to move into Bitcoin eventually. This is corporate power translating narrative trust into structural leverage. Alphabet converts its perceived permanence into fixed capital while the window is open. The active issuance reinforces the belief that made it possible. Volatility compresses, spreads behave, the loop closes. Markets understand the surface, demand exists, the long end absorbs supply, pricing holds. This reads as stability. The deeper move is temporal. This is the system choosing to pretend the next century is knowable. That pretense will organize portfolios, suppress convexivity, and delay pricing until it no longer can. Alphabet is monetizing the present illusion of certainty before the next fracture forces a reset. This is duration being privatized. The century just got shorter. It's duration being privatized, but it is a initial smoke signal of the separation of money and state. This is a private company competing against the sovereign debt issuance. And I think it's more credible than sovereign debt issuance. If you had to invest today in Macron's Euro bond over 10 to 20 years versus Google's 100-year bond, what would you buy? If I had to choose between the two, very easy. Not even a question, right? And that's why we have to start thinking of long term. It's part of the separation of the money and state. It is part of the reprogramming of the subconscious. It's part of the benefit, the dividend we're going to get from having a Bitcoin standard and from having money savable again as it stretches time horizons. And we're getting to the turtle part of our story today. This is part of the turtle story here. Here we go, right? This is the important piece from Jeff Bezos. Again, I'm reiterating that I believe Jeff Bezos will be a Bitcoiner publicly this year. I'm 2 years late, but it's going to happen. I keep making this public pronouncement, but this is the reason here. He put a picture of a turtle. Here you see Blue Origin's motto is Gradatum Ferocitor, step by step, ferociously. The company has a coat of arms that includes a pair of turtles, referring to the steady and consistent tortoise in the tortoise versus the hare fable, heading to the stars. And indeed, you see the two turtles here, the stars there. And what you're really learning about here is that Jeff Bezos, not in the Epstein files, meeting now regularly with the Secretary of War. I do believe you're going to hear Jeff Bezos behind this new system. You're going to see him buy a bit bond or something like that in the future. And now compare it to the sludge people system, right? This is Nina Turner saying, "Yeah, was accept EBT, right? Here's the accept EBT sign really necessary?" Well, yeah, this is what the food stamp sludge people are going for. This is it. This is bimetallism. You've got 100-year bonds from Google who are going to be mining in space, Bitcoin mining in space. You've got Jeff Bezos and these companies talking about the turtle and going to the moon and going to Mars, and he's building his 10,000-year clock. You've got Bitcoiners, the wealthy, the energy focused, the long-term planners versus, and this is what our bimetallic system is going to look like, the sludge people on the food stamps. So EBT is necessary. I'm for EBT. I don't want anyone starving. But and you're going to have people who live and die for this stuff. But remember that people attach to power structures, and people will simply change their mind based on power structures. And while I do want philanthropic help for people who need it, who can't figure out how to feed themselves, I want Jemima Kelly to be able to say like, and still have something to eat. All of her skills of like aren't really going to feed her in a Bitcoin standard world without money laundering and sludge people supporting the Financial Times and having Epstein and those types involved, and infrastructure, which is really just censorship and narrative manipulation. So in order to get past that, you're going to have to find some way to feed the Jemima Kellys of the world. And the idea I've had for a long time is EBT, that the dollar becomes food stamps. Aaron McIntyre saying, imagine the ethno-narcissism required to admit that your understanding of that you understand being a welfare leech as central to your identity, but believe yourself to be superior to those who steal from, which is exactly what's going on, which is why we're going to separate, which is why we're having this separation of people, of systems, of money and state, because we're living on two parallel tracks here. And it's important to see that because, again, people align with power structures, and that's why you've got all of these folks. Elizabeth Warren warning here, Democrat Party worried about offending big donors, doomed to failure. Balaji says, yes, blues are ready to devour Democrat millionaires. The pie is shrinking, so blues will eat more, will eat anyone. That's been the lesson of the past decade. Ossoff went after Soros in a speech. I mean, during the Red Terror, the dumb communists thought Stalin would spare them. The dumb Democrats probably think they'll be spared during the blue seizure too. So indeed, they won't be. And it's why this is happening, right? By the way, it's obvious that the 2026 billionaire wealth seizure will be followed by a millionaire wealth seizure. Why? Because the same California Democrats who are trying to expropriate 200 billionaires proposed a wealth tax on 30,000 millionaires back in 2020. Page out, Bryn out, Teal out, Elon out, almost everyone out of California for these reasons, which is what's happening, right? John Otoro, did you just say people align with power structures? That is kind of profound, I think. That's exactly what I said. Yeah, it's aligning with power structures. All right. Hank is in the house, everyone. I'm going to hear from Hank. You're all going to hear from Hank for the next few minutes before we sign off here and we move to Hank's program. But let me get Hank on screen first. And there you go, Hank. How you doing, my man? How you doing? I got you on
I'm doing well.
Got you on
What's that?
I got you on widescreen. For what reason? I don't know. Oh, there we go.
Different computer. My newer Mac, much bigger screen, much more technologically advanced. Pictures better. Yeah, I'm coming in here 4K right now.
I see her.
I did. Streamlined faster than ever. Did it myself. I had an ugly cry last night. Just clipped it all off. Feeling better and good though. How are you this morning? What are you guys
had
up
to
to?
stack those cheap sats with the haircutting.
Got to. That's $30 in a haircut. I could spend 100. I'll take the 70. I put those in the stats every time.
You got it.
Mm-hmm. So what have you guys been up to on the Great Awakening this morning?
Nolan? Well, we've been having fun. First, we were talking a little bit about. I started it with this idea of cognitive security and how you have to be very careful about. It's almost like getting your drink spiked. So I said, the people who worried about Bad Bunny yesterday, don't worry about Bad Bunny. He was actually promoting the Dunroe doctrine, by talking,
right.
And all these different things. I said, I showed what happens when you're a victim of this, because Trump is just excellent at this. I use the Canadian example. You know, Trump did this big thing on the bridge to Detroit. That he's not going to let it go live or whatever, and But he did his thing again where he says that if the Canadians make the deal with the Chinese, the first thing the Chinese are going to do is ban ice hockey.
Oh, well, that can't stand. That deal is already dead in the water. You can't do that.
But here's the thing. Here's the brilliance of Trump, and this is why cognitive security is important, because anyone who's lighting themselves on fire today about it, they're not gonna. Obviously, it's not gonna work, right? You're not gonna ban ice hockey, but what you get out of it is everyone wondering exactly what China could. No one's talking about the deal with China and Canada. At what limit is the effect of Canada gonna begin and end? So of course it won't reach hockey, but you force everyone to start thinking about, well, what could they do? You got to check off hockey as no, it's safe from China influence, right? So you hear everything like this, but your mind can't help but isolate what could they do. Not that you can get to the answer, but this is why you've got to be very careful of cognitive security, because it's going to work. No one's talking about Canada's sovereignty versus China in Canada. But this will force everyone to talk about it. So Trump wins again, you know?
Yeah. I hate to say it, though, if hockey's not in the chopping block, it might be poutine or maple syrup or something. One of your pastimes, right? Or is that more of a Montreal thing, the poutine?
It's actually fake. It's Greek. It's a Greek thing. Yeah, it was a Greek diner. If you ever been to Greek diners in like New Jersey or something, you know, the Greek. They brought these restaurants that were like a pizzeria and a souvlaki, but you can get a hot dog and hamburger and a fry. It was just the everything on one menu Greek recipes that started in the 60s with the gravy and the cheese. Now it is a French Canadian thing. It became French Canadian before it became Canadian.
Got it.
But it's really like fast, you know, it's not like it's not high culinary. You know, Quebec is really good for food. Poutine, I would say, is you know, junk food. It's like alcohol food, you know. Now the maple syrup they also can affect because it's completely monopolized. They have a control board that just absorbs all of the maple syrup so they can set the price. Because you can't make maple syrup everywhere in the world. You could near where, you know, Wisconsin is sort of the only sort of off the beaten path place in the world where you can make maple syrup. Otherwise, it's confined to Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, a little bit of New York, and Canada. So it's not easy to make maple syrup. You need the temperature swings between cold, and it only flows in those days where the seasons are changing. Yeah, you need the, just like you can get in Chicago, the 20 degrees at night in
we're good for
April, and then 39, 40 in the day. You need that range is when the maple syrup, when the sap flows. Without that, it doesn't work. So there's hardly anywhere in the world that can actually produce maple syrup.
See, an American would never have this much innate knowledge on syrup as you guys do. So there you go.
It's available all over my area. We, as kids, we sit under the trees and let it fall, the sap fall in our face, and drink it. You know, it's so good.
Sticky.
So
man,
good.
Things are better then.
So good.
All right. Well, Nolan, we got a lot to talk about on our show, Rocks and TV News today, too, because I'm going to let you finish up here in a second. We're going to be talking about what's going on with ICE. Is there some new regulations in play there? We're going to be talking about all these crazy wrench attacks that have been going after crypto holders, and we got some guests in store. So we got a lot to chat about today. I'm going to let you finish up here at the Great Awakening, and I'll see you in just a bit, my friend.
Awesome, man. All right, folks. Thanks a lot. Come around on the Roxham TV feeds, everyone. I will be with Hank. I've got to charge my device. I think it's about to run out of power, so I'm going to put the charger on. And then I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Pardon me, I can't get to all of your comments. I don't know why this computer is lagging all of a sudden. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, everyone. It's not going great at the end. I don't know if you can still hear me. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to play the logo. You're going to see the thanks for watching screen right after. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate it. Sorry if I get to the chat today. You're so buggy, but take it easy, everyone. Finally. the turtles. We went around the world for that one, indeed. All right, folks. Peace.